and being told that you can't do something, or governing that player, or it seems so unfortunate to me that I want them, even in a micro environment of 5 days, I want them to see 3, 4, 5 different coaches and realize that there are different cues and stuff that they can take, technical points, tactical points, that can maybe switch them on or provide something different, what have you. So it's tough to hear that that's happening. I know that it does, but it's tough to hear that, especially when someone, you can see that 15-year-old girl that's really going, she's going to be really fucking good, and somebody is doing that, and it's unfortunate to take away the development of the left foot, or the ability to play high to take away an opportunity, or whatever it may be. And it's tough. I know it's the case, but hopefully there'll be more and more coaches that'll be much more willing to extend a leash to a player.
It's interesting, Stan, what you just said right there in regards to, it's unfortunate for these players to not develop these skill sets, and that a coach is, holding them back and everything like that. Jack, I think one of the most difficult things when it comes to a development plan. Yeah, go
Michael, ahead, I cut you off real quick. I just think about time. I just want to hear the other two things really quick from Jack that he was talking about with his gig. So you might be able to segue your question.
I won't even remember what I was talking about, Bill. Go ahead.
I'm glad we did talk about the education, because I know a lot of people more than just us have had a lot of questions about it and kind of where it's going, where it's been. Yeah. But real quick, Jack, hit those other two things that you were going to mention about kind of your focus and your responsibilities.
Yeah. So the other two sections that I'm working on, so education is one of them, but talent ID is obviously another big one. So that's part of what we try and do. And again, we want to increase the number of touch points that goalkeepers can have with our national teams. So whether that be through local scouts in their areas, through the talent ID centres, whether that be through national camps that we hold within, hopefully, the new national training centre when that comes on board in sometime this year. So that's a big part of it. And then when they're in our system, when they're in our national teams, is making sure that whilst we will have some goalkeepers that will be able to perform now, there'll also be some goalkeepers that will develop later and develop in the longer term. And that might be someone like a Matt Fries, who apparently came from nowhere and into the national teams, according to Stan. But he,
Harvard, you got Chet Messing. There you go.
Yes, he was in Philadelphia, he was in the second team in Philadelphia, so it's making sure that he's monitored and developed them, and he's not someone that's missed, that maybe he doesn't come into the national teams at 15, 16, 17, but he maybe comes into national teams and plays a 20s World Cup, or, has that sort of experience. And we want to make sure that we provide those experiences where we not only monitor the ones that are in our system, we have somebody who's in charge of making sure that pathway is aligned and that pathway is monitored, whether you're in our system or whether you're just on the edge of our system, or whether you're nowhere near our system, just in case that you develop late, like a Matt Turner, who was nowhere near the system until he came into that sort of late, the late mark that he came into. So I think that's sort of the processes we're going through within that, and we're developing our systems internally here, we're developing our processes externally. So again, the regional camps that we're putting on within that is part of process. And then the third thing is within our national team. So we're looking to increase the number of full-time goalkeeper coaches that we have within our system. So again, that continuity and that overview of the pathway will be much more consistent. Thank you. We're also trying to provide support with our network coaches. So
I mean that seriously. I didn't mean to be like a dick. I think that's great. I think that it's, again, our country's so big that we need more of you. The country's too big for you. We need 8 to 10 of you. Yeah. I mean that sincerely. It's about time.
Yeah, it reminds me.
Yeah. No, and again, I think.
Go ahead, Jack.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're the head of goalkeeping. I am just a comedian who lives in Los Angeles. So you continue on, please, if there's something you want to say.
No, I think within those national teams, like we also want to make sure that our network coaches, so the coaches that come in and support our national teams, whilst also working in clubs or working in in local clubs as well, that they also get the support too. So we're trying to have monthly sort of annual webinars with them. Again, we're trying to support their development within it and within our national teams too. And we currently have a group, they're away, so all of our head coaches and a few of our network coaches are away on a individual development camp in Phoenix. They've brought some college age goalkeepers in and some college age outfield players in, and they're just trying some sessions out, and they're spitballing ideas, and they're working on their development as well. So things like this are going to start to happen, and we're very fortunate in that our sporting director Matt Crocker here is really trying to drive and push everything forward, up to the CEOs and our presidents that are really pushing and trying to develop what we do with US soccer here. And I think it's a really exciting time to be part of the federation, to be part of what we're doing. And I think we're only going to help support coaches that are out there and goalkeepers for us, but players as well, that to get the opportunities to fulfill their dreams and play for the national team and go to a World Cup or an Olympics. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, time. It's interesting, Jack, what you were just saying right there, and I think one of the conversations that, I've had with a lot of people in regards to obviously the scale of what you're talking about with the country and having communication, because of the fact that you can't get to certain places, a lot of people are kind of either left to their own devices or they're going with like what works for them in their environment, and they're not exploring and they're not trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and I want to see in the federation, when people come into the licenses, that they are encouraged to fail. They're encouraged to try things that may not work, or do something different, or think outside the box, rather than a lot of the times. I think it used to be with US Soccer, whenever I remember when the Development Academy, when USDA first started, they would have instructors, come to shadow at the clubs, and people would try to, when they were coming in, run things the federation way, and they would run their session the way the federation would run it or whatever. And you're living a lie, because then you're going to go back to doing whatever your thing is the week after or whatever. So it's like, is there a conversation in US Soccer to be like, we want people to fail, we want people to explore, we want people to try stuff, or challenge us and show us something different that we may not have even thought of before?
Yeah, definitely. I think we want to ensure that coaches can still keep their personality and their way of coaching and things like, without knowing you very much, Stan, I think me and you have different personalities from what it seems. But, and we will coach in different ways. But what we want to try and make sure is that, and I think we're pretty aligned in this, is that how we coach, or the principles and guiding ideas are similar, but you will add your own flavor, your own personality to the way that you coach. So we're not going to be too prescriptive, because I don't think we can be, but we will give you guidelines and ways that we've done and that we've seen and experienced. But again, like as you said, around those coaching things, like when I was working for the English FA, we had coaching educational courses and stuff, and the best moments that we had were sat in the bar having a beer with the coaches that you're working with on a night, and you were chatting and sharing ideas and talking about things that had gone well and things that hadn't. And I think they're the experiences that we need to make sure that we share with each other. And I think, hopefully through our formal and our informal educational processes, we will start to increase the number of conversations that we're having, but we will guide and show without being prescriptive on how we would like coaches to coach over here in the US.
So a challenge that I don't expect you to answer, Coach, I seriously don't, but we're coming up onto a World Cup, and that's exciting. And I've lived through '94 as well, and hear how exciting that was. And MLS to start in '96, and it was supposed to start earlier, but it did. It got going in '96. That's awesome. All that sort of stuff. But to then hope and think.
Welcome back. We have another edition of Gloves Off, and today we are joined by I'm usually try to say all the accolades at the start, but for here, this one's a little tricky. We have former UNC national champion. We have former women's national team World Cup winner, and current coach of, or is founder, coach, Dynasty Goalkeeping. We have one of the true OG goalkeeper junkies, is maybe what I would what I would say. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure. It's great to be here, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. It sounds like recently, just to really put this, the goalkeeper junkie, to really back that up. This weekend we had camps. Is that right? We were doing some goalkeeper.
I had multiple mini camps the month of December, and then I've had 2 in that kind of juncture just after Christmas and New Year's Eve, or right around that, or just after New Year's Eve. I can't keep track of the dates, but yeah, I've had 2 recently. So yeah, coming off of that.
Yeah, wonderful. We'll talk more about Dynasty here in a little bit, but I always like the winter training where everyone's kind of bundled up and you see the breath and everyone's kind of huffing a little bit, and the ground's muddy but not soft.
Down here, actually, we've been lucky. We've had a much warmer winter. So I actually had a student from New York, from upstate New York, and then one from Michigan. They were thrilled with the temperatures in the 50s.
Perfect. Good. Well, that's wonderful. Yeah. That's wonderful. Well, Tracy, we're going to wind back all the way start. And I know there's a million things that you can talk about when it comes to like those early stages of goalkeeping. But I'm really curious on when you reflect on your younger self, did you have any awareness, or was there something that you recognized either then or now that you said, hey, that made me a little different and that made goalkeeping fun for me? What was the connection relationship with goalkeeping when you were first starting out, and what made you a little different from the other person who maybe wasn't quite as interested in the position?
I think it's a similar thing that draws a lot of athletes to the position, is just this, fearlessness would be one thing, just not afraid to get in the mix and to have contact, to make contact, to throw my body around. I think that's a piece that a lot of goalkeepers would say that they relate to. That was never an issue for me. I don't think at that age, when I was really young, thought about it as pressure, because obviously it is. I think I just saw it as a challenge. It was different. And I split my time. When I was a youth player, I spent half the game as a front runner and half the game in goal. And I was fortunate that I had another really good athlete on the team that she enjoyed the same. And we actually were very good friends all through high school. And so I was just lucky, that we were able to do that for a very long time until before high school. Right before high school, I kind of knew it would be in my best interest to pick one or the other.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the contact. I'll be honest, I feel like I see a lot of young goalkeepers that like goalkeeping, and they're fascinated with like the problem solving or technique or getting a good craft. But when it does come to the contact, that is something that either gets scary or something that they're not maybe excited about. And obviously these goalkeepers maybe don't quite have the longer careers. Right. So it is interesting to hear you say that, like the contact is, because I just feel like there are a lot of goalkeepers that maybe aren't as thrilled about that as at 12, 13, 14, 15. That sounds like
I would agree. I absolutely would agree. I think that's a separator as to, a certain tier of goalkeeper. The higher levels that you get, you have to be comfortable with that. It is a contact sport, and our position is going to demand that we go up, over, and through things. And if that's not something that's part of your DNA, you're going to reach a limit at some point. You could be a really good athlete, a really good shot stopper, really good at problem solving, all the pieces that you mentioned. But at some point, you're going to kind of reach that ceiling if you're not comfortable with dealing with contact, because there's going to be some plays that you're not going to be comfortable making, getting stuck in on a breakaway, going through people and bodies on crosses. You're going to find some limitations there if you're not comfortable with that piece. And I look back now at, well, I don't now, but I have, as an adult, looked back at some of my videos, and they're on like VHS tapes. And thankfully have been converted to digital, of my time when I was a youth goalkeeper at Soccer Plus. And contact was not a problem way back then. I was reckless. Like things weren't pretty, but I didn't have a problem with making contact. So, I know that was part of who I was right from the beginning.
Was that, you talked about that being a part of who you were, was that something that was really instilled or supported by family or close friends, or was that just something that you kind of realized, hey, I'm kind of unique in this? I'm not that people were steering you away necessarily, but did you have a lot of support in that area, or was that just something that you just started doing?
I think it probably was. I don't think it was from my parents. I had support from my parents as far as playing, but I didn't have any direction as far as like goalkeeping from my parents, or pushing me or steering me one way or the other as far as like the physicality or aggression. So I wouldn't say that. I would say that if I think about my mom and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, definitely very stubborn and very, in a good way, not in a bad way, and very competitive, more so. That trait for sure comes from my mom's side. So I definitely would say, even though my mom had limited athletic opportunities from the era that she grew up in, she was an athlete. It just was, not as many things back then. So I definitely, from playing games around the house and on, whatever, outdoors, all the things, picked up on the competitive spirit from my mom. And later in life, I realized that came from my grandmother as well. But more so on the physicality piece, I think I witnessed that really well when I went to Soccer Plus. I can distinctly remember going to camps in Connecticut. Was oftentimes, I think the first one I went to was in Brandeis in Massachusetts, and seeing the staff coaches. And, I was, I think 13 when I first went to Soccer Plus, and then I went every summer. If I was lucky, sometimes I got to go twice a summer, but more often than not, we could only afford one camp a summer. But I had staff coaches. Mary Harvey was one of my staff coaches. Kim Wyatt was one of my staff coaches. Carla Chin, Canadian national team goalkeeper, one of my staff coaches. Kim Maslin, Kamendimer, one of my staff coaches. These are all the, first goalkeepers of the women's national team. That's who imprinted on me very, very early on. And I saw them training with the guys and, dueling and competing physically with them and not backing down. So I think that probably was the biggest thing that shaped me, is, wow, that's possible. And that's also, what's necessary.
Yeah. I'm glad you said the word stubborn in that, because I think both of what you just kind of talked about, and then also I was just thinking back to my time in the summer with you, of like, there really is like a good level of stubbornness that seems to run through your family, where like you've got laser focus on something, and it's not to, I think people think stubborn is, being rude or obtuse or something. It's like, no,
correct. It's not a
we're
bad
going
thing.
in this direction, like it's, this is what's happening. Like nothing's stopping it. That all definitely tracks. I don't want to, this might be one of, if not the most painful memories, but your sophomore year in high school, you break your back. And I'm very curious on, you don't have to go through the details of all that, but I guess I'm curious on that moment and how that either slowed down or furthered your resolve to get to college. What is the connection, or what is the string of dots of breaking your back to committing to UNC, which sounds like a crazy, arc to have? Like, what is that timeline and relationship?
Well, I will say, thankfully, the recruiting that back then was not as accelerated as it is now. So, I got injured in, I think it was probably December or January, winter of my sophomore year playing basketball. And it took a solid 6 months before I was actually really properly diagnosed. Took a while till I got an x-ray. Just thought it was like lower back spasms, muscle, this, that, and the other. Like,
you're still like walking around doing stuff at this point.
Yeah, I was walking around doing stuff because it's a spondylolisthesis. So it's like, the broken back term sounds a bit more dramatic. Is it a crack in the vertebrae? Yes. But it's not like I was fragile. I was just in pain. It created a lot of sciatic pain. And so anytime I tried to do anything quick, dynamic, stretching, reaching for stuff, I had a lot of pain, the sciatic pain. So I went through rehab, all that sort of stuff. And then finally I was properly diagnosed. and then tried to play. Like my big test was, because the doctors were like, yeah, you can play with this if you want, we'll put you in a brace, and it's up to like what's tolerated. And so they developed this form-fitting brace for me, out of like that moldable plastic, the heat moldable plastic. And I remember the first time putting this thing on. I mean, it was a corset, literally like from huge, snapped on, put it on the first time when the guy fitted it. I'm like, I'm supposed to play in this? I can't even breathe in this. Like, and so, but I found a way, you get used to things. And I went to a Soccer Plus camp that summer. I was like, all right, well, here's my test. If I can deal with this and play with this, then off I go. And the level of training that I wanted to do wasn't going to be feasible. So then, then we went down the path of having a surgery and getting a spinal fusion surgery so that I could play at the level I wanted to. So it wasn't something that was necessarily required if I wasn't going to be active, but because I chose to want it to be active, it was the choice. But it was also a choice of, at that time, the surgery is very different than how it is done now. It was told to me that it would be a year-long recovery.
Wow.
And so that year long meant I missed my junior year of sports. And so that was, back then, club and high school were separated. They didn't overlap. There were rules that prevented that, which I think was a good thing. But that's very different now. So I missed my fall season in high school, and then missed basketball and club season. I was starting to kind of get back into a little bit of very limited training, walking, whatnot. And then come that summer, I think I was back playing club by that summer. So I think I was back fully go at 10 months.
Okay. And then UNC enters the picture. Start of your senior year at some point?
Yeah. I mean, the links to UNC, more of my recruiting was more regionally from coaches that knew me, so I had played ODP. So Tim Wheaton was the coach at Harvard, and he was our ODP coach. So I was in the loop for Harvard. Steve Swanson, who's now at UVA, was the head coach at Dartmouth. And my brother had attended Dartmouth, so that was another big school in the mix. UConn, and some of the other, and then UNC and Duke and some of these other schools, I think, got in the mix because I had traveled south, I think, with the regional team, or it might have even been with my club team. I don't even know what team it was, but at some point I traveled south. And that kind of opened up my eyes a little bit to some schools down here. And then I think it was also from some advising and mentorship from Tony, because obviously he was my coach way before his national team days at Soccer Plus. And so he, kind of expanded my eyes as to some schools that I might have some potential to look at, because it was so different. The recruiting was so different. There was no college soccer on TV, and it was Soccer America. And you would get a little bit of news about women's soccer, and it was like a month behind by the time you got it. Very limited, so the coverage was mainly the top teams. Did you have a VHS tape of yourself that you could send to people? Because I remember people talking about that, but I don't know if that was okay. It was that was a thing quite back then. I mean, I had some footage of myself from Soccer Plus on VHS tape, but it wouldn't have ever been something that I would have wanted to send to a college coach. So no, it was all based on UNC's interest in me. It was all based on a referral from Tony, because at that point, Tony was running camps all throughout the country. And so he was a resource to a lot of college coaches who would say, okay, you're seeing all the top goalkeepers in the country. Who would you recommend? Because there weren't all these showcases that there are now. So it was hard for the college coaches to travel all over the place. Is what are they going to go to? Each individual club game? There weren't that many events. There was regionals. And so it was very different for coaches to be able to identify talent. So they relied a lot on their networks, a lot more so than they did today. So my name got dropped into the hat along with, I'm sure, several others to Anson. So that's how I got on their list. And I think I proactively mailed them and got on so I got on their mailing list that way. And then it was more of a, we'd love to have you type of thing, because I academically got in on my own. Anson had not ever seen me play.
Funny. Wow. Yeah. That's what you're saying.
And I was not the priority recruit. But I didn't really hear that part. I heard, if you're the best goalkeeper, you'll play. And so I was like, okay, that's enough.
No, I think that's that stubbornness of like, I'm going this way. This is what's happening. So it's very good.
I mean, but in fairness, I was very close to going to Dartmouth. I mean, those three, Harvard, Dartmouth, and UNC, were all very close for different reasons in my mind. I mean, they're all excellent choices, and I couldn't have gone wrong. And I was very close to going to Dartmouth. So that was
well, both Harvard and Dartmouth at the time also, a little different where they are now. I mean, a lot of those Ivy schools very early on, very competitive. So that all checks. I do have a newspaper clipping that I just thought was great. So this is senior year, getting named. I guess this is the equivalent of like All State or
the All Scholastic, similar. I think they had different things depending on the newspaper.
But the hair is great. The timing is great. The fact that like it's I pull up the first person I pulled up a newspaper clip for, and the fact that pulling a newspaper clip in the first place is kind of funny now. This is December '90, going in your senior year. So I just love this. This is great. But I before we jump to UNC, do you have any memories of the '91 World Cup? Because I remember talking to Michelle Demko, and she said she had a VHS tape of the '91 the final, and how she would watch it on repeat. I guess I'm thinking, well, Mary Harvey. Did you have a connection like, oh, my coach is playing? Like, what connections at all did you have the '91 World Cup as a,
Yeah, well, that was my freshman year at UNC. So it was really cool for me because when I showed up to UNC, there were all kinds of things. I'll jump past preseason and some of those pieces, but, I had teammates, Mia Hamm and Christine Lilly, that were on the team. But those were teammates that I was just getting to know. But they were, on that World Cup roster. But because Anson was the coach, and because of the timing of the World Cup, they were training in Chapel Hill on our fields down at Finley Fields. And so we would show up to training and they would be finishing and they would be wrapping up their training. So that was the first time I got to see, besides, Kim Maslin and Kim Wyant and Mary Harvey that I had known from Soccer Plus days. That was the first time I was getting to witness the full national team training and seeing them face to face and watching them train. I distinctly remember seeing Michelle Akers for the first time and just being in complete awe, like physical specimen and just domination like no other. I mean, like everybody says, she definitely is warrior mentality, warrior everything. And that struck me really, like I said, that's probably the biggest image that I have of the women's national team that I was just like, wow, what a difference in level.
Did you have
train was really cool at that age. And so then knowing that, obviously that Anson was there and then some of our teammates were there. Yeah, we definitely watched as best as we could. And I don't think we could watch it live. So I think we watched it after the fact. I don't even know how we watched it, but I did watch it at some point.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Did you have any, when you watched the training or the games, did you have any sense of like, hey, I can go do that? Or was that like, hey, maybe down the line I can do that? Or like, I don't know. Like you mentioned the difference in levels. How did you compare yourself to that? I
definitely didn't. At that point, it wasn't like seeing myself like, ooh, I think I can do that. I think it was like a seed was planted that looks like that would be amazing. Like that's a goal that I would like to have. And it's the first time it became tangible because you see it, like this, the women's national team hadn't been on that radar. They were formed in '85 and maybe we saw a little bit in Soccer America, but we didn't really see anything. There were no events. So you didn't read about them. You didn't really know that was like a goal or a vision. You didn't know what, it was like a paper team, in theory, because they had such few events. So this was the first time that I actually got to interact with them and see them. And so then it became, that would be a pretty amazing experience. Like that's like the next step, that I'm going to start to shoot for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, focusing on your time at UNC, you redshirt your first year, and then your redshirt freshman year, the '92 season. You played 16 games, so you've gone.
I didn't play that much. You're good at it.
Yeah, well,
I played in that many. Wow. But there's probably not that many minutes.
900 minutes. So you got something. But you mentioned splitting time growing up in high school. But I guess I'm curious of, you get to UNC, obviously you're excited and you're going to go prove yourself. I'm curious on those first that first year, but those first couple of years where, it's tough to get on the field, you're redshirting, you're splitting time. What did you gain from being on the bench, or what were you thinking when you're on the bench? Was it just frustration, or do you feel like you got a fair shot, or was it one of those things just like, okay, hey, if I stay on this path, like it's going somewhere, like I just need to wait out a little bit?
There was a lot of frustration. I was not mentally in a great place as far as being able to deal with the competition and to be able to own my pieces. That was a big part of my journey, was to understand that what Anson was telling me was the truth, but it was hard for me to own that, because it was hard to hear that I wasn't ready. It was hard to hear that, I was the number 2 for the first time in my career. It was hard to hear that I wasn't playing consistently because I would have moments in training where I was definitely the better goalkeeper. But I would also have shaky moments, and I would have shaky moments in those games when I would get some minutes. And so it became this like self-affirming, self-affirming conclusion that, I was what Anson and Dino, our assistant coach, were like, she's good for about 1 goal a game. That was like, sadly, the nickname that I learned way after the fact of, it was called one goal Noonan was my nickname. Like I was good for 1 goal a game. Now that's not to say that I gave up all those goals in those games, but there would be this shaky moment that would happen. And that would be enough to confirm to them that, yeah, that's why she's our number 2. But I would see myself in training being equal, sometimes better, right there, neck and neck. Not that I felt like I was better than Shelly, my counterpart. But I felt like I was right there. And so, this frustration grew in me, and I just didn't own some of the pieces that I needed to own about my performance in games and the pressures that I was putting myself on when I would step into games. And that's why I wasn't performing well. So yeah, it took some time.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the goalkeeping correlationship, and you can talk about Dino, Shelly Finger, who's a longtime starter. You go through the record books, which I will say on the side, looking at the record books for UNC is kind of funny because all the goalkeeping stats are so minimal. So you had 22 goals in your entire, 5 years there. Like for some goalkeepers, that's a whole one season for them.
Yeah, it's just so different though. It's a very different time.
Yeah, but yeah, tell me about that goalkeeping core, because I'm thinking, you're in a tough spot. You're frustrated. Of course, Shelly's probably doing everything she can to keep you on the bench in all reality, but you've also got a competitive cauldron, which can very easily make people close together, but it can also very easily turn people against each other. What was that goalkeeping core dynamic like?
Yeah, I was fortunate. We had 4 really fun, good goalkeepers, but it was also really unique in that we were all academically very motivated. That I think made our core very unique. So there was myself, there was Shelly, who also came in with me, and then Jen Eames came in our year as well, and she was, I would say, was probably our 3rd, and she was just like this multi-sport athlete, great at everything that she picked up. Moorhead Scholar, which is the top scholarship at UNC, and then Sonia Trojak, and I think Sonia might have been a Moorhead as well. But Sonia came in. Here's a kind of a unique tidbit that you might find interesting. Sonia came in as a field player, walk on, and she was a year below us, and she came in just happy to be there, just wanting to be part of the program, reserve. Worked really hard through preseason. End of preseason comes, and I distinctly remember this was like in a team meeting. It wasn't an individual thing. I'm pretty sure. At least this is how the memory is in my head. Maybe Sonia could correct me, and he basically was like, Sonia, if you want to stay on the goal on the team, you need to become a goalkeeper. And I was just like, wait, what? She's a field player. You're going to convert her to a goalkeeper? He wanted 4 goalkeepers, and she was going to get cut. And so she was like, okay. Never played a lick in her life, okay? And so she decides to become a goalkeeper. So she became the 4th in our core. And man, every day, like we feared for her life, because she was stepping in the goal against Mia Hamm, Christine Lilly, like all our studs that are just like no mercy, and she just hardly knows how to catch a ball. But to her credit, she figured it out, and she figured it out fast. And she learned how to dive, learned how to manage breakaways. These are skill sets that are not easy to learn, and they're certainly not easy to learn at that pace.
Yeah.
And she became a really good goalkeeper. And so it made for a fun core.
Cool.
That being said, I was not great at dealing with that competitive cauldron piece directly with Shelly. It's easy, to have, a good connection with Jen and Sonia because there wasn't as direct of a threat there, right? Yeah. And I saw their value as human beings, and they worked just as hard as everybody else, and they were great contributors to team chemistry. And I'm sure they really were fighting hard for time too, so take nothing away from them. But it was hard for me to get a really tight bond with Shelly because I saw her as my competition. And I was not good at that piece. So did we hang off the field? No, I can't say that we did. Did we respect each other? Absolutely. Definitely respected her. But were there times when I was sitting on the bench hoping that she'd mess up? Yeah, I'll be 100% honest. Yeah, I wanted my chance. I'm competitive. Was that a healthy place for me to be? No. So, it wasn't a healthy place. And I know that now as a coach, and I figured that out. That was a big part of my transition into getting maturing as a player, and getting over my problems with my consistency and my performance. But that was where I was, my first couple of years. I was in my head struggling with that competitive cauldron piece. And to kind of close up that loop, Shelly and I now have much better relationship and are in much better contact. We went a long gap when we were not, after graduation, we were not, tight friends. We were teammates and, supportive teammates. But now we have a much better friendship. So I think that's actually really cool that it had full circle, that we kind of understand. It was challenging for both of us.
Did y'all ever have, I feel like sometimes like movies and TV shows kind of glamorize like a new era or resolution between people, but did y'all ever have like a moment where y'all just sat down and just talked about all, looking back, or was it more of like, hey, time has passed, you kind of look at someone, you're like, all right, now like we're in this new era, like I guess I'm curious on, as time went on, how did the relationship progress, knowing that it was such a fierce competition?
How did it progress when we were in college or since then?
Since then, after UNC.
Oh, okay, way after. Yeah, it wasn't until probably, I'm trying to think what year it was, 2020. I don't know, sometime in the 2020s. So recently, in the last 5 years or so, I was in Fort Worth, which is where Shelly lives, for some knee surgeries, and so I was like, hey, I think one of my teammates was like, Shelly lives there, and so I was like, all right, I want to reconnect, and so. And she actually was really helpful for me in some of the things with my surgery. And then she found herself back in North Carolina at another time because she was playing in some adult league, games out in Greensboro. So I went and watched her play, which was fun. And then she has come back through for alumni events. But in one of those times with an alumni event, we did kind of like go down the path a little bit about the dynamic of splitting. Because that was a unique dynamic that happened later in my career. And, because we were discussing some of the goalkeepers at the time were some goalkeepers that I had trained that were at UNC when she was here visiting for alumni stuff. So we were kind of debating a little bit, as to how hard it is for the goalkeeper that doesn't get time, should they be splitting like we used to split? And, obviously I benefited from that environment because it gave me a chance. It gave me a chance to get in the door. But she did not like it, for obvious reasons. She was used to starting, but I guess what she had said is she would have preferred to have split whole games because we were in the pattern of splitting halves. And that makes sense too. And I would have been all right with that because most of our weekends were 2 weekend games. But then there's always the one game's a better game than the other game, and then you go a longer gap without, playing. And both strategies. And I'm pretty sure you would, probably know better because you've looked through the record books, but I'm pretty sure that we rotated who started and who closed. because there is definitely a different dynamic then. One of you gets a better warm up. One of you potentially is playing with more pressure in the second half if it's, a tied game. So I think we had some flopping.
I'm glad you said that, because I was actually wondering, because I was like, the numbers. So to just kind of quickly give like a air chart here. So 900 minutes you're in 92, and then they actually get cut just about in half for 93, and then 94 you're looking at 15 games started, 26 games played, and then 95 even more.
So minutes. I had more minutes as my redshirt freshman year.
Yeah. So that was one thing I was going to ask after.
I didn't know that.
Well, I was wondering. So I guess that's interesting here. And you weren't on pace for a goal a game for what's worth. It was less than that. But I guess I'm curious about those first 2 years. Were you looking to transferring now, which I know transfer is totally different then?
Right.
But did that come across your mind? Like, were there any conversations?
The only time it crossed my mind was my true freshman year when I was redshirting. That freshman fall, my very first semester, because that was the biggest shock to my system. You go from starting as a high school player, a club player, to being on the end of the bench. Like at that point, I was the number 3 goalkeeper, because we had Lori Walker, was an upperclassman at that time, and that's who Shelley and Lori were splitting time my freshman year, where I ended up redshirting. So I literally was down the end of the bench and was just like a no-name. And that was a real blow to the ego. It is to anybody. It's an adjustment. And so at that point I was like, I could be starting at Dartmouth right now. It could be, and so I did think about it. But then the next step was, Hanover, New Hampshire. I could see it. I'd been there multiple times when my brother went there, and I was just like, all I could see is wanting to wear my Tar Heel blue.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like I internally felt like a Tar Heel. I loved my teammates. I loved Chapel Hill. I loved the school. So all the other pieces were the right fit for me. So even when the soccer piece wasn't where I had wanted it to be, and stuff never is, that's life. So when I was struggling, since everything else was fine, I just was like, I don't want to leave. I want to stick this out. I want to invest in myself and see what I'm capable of. And that just took a lot longer than I thought.
Totally understand.
The splitting time the 50-50 splitting time didn't come until my redshirt junior year.
Oh, okay.
The other splits were not even splits. When I would get time, it was like we were up 3-0. Let's throw Tracy in for 15 minutes. We're up 5-0. Let's throw her in for, the reserves go in. That's what I was getting my redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore year. I was not getting equal minutes. It wasn't until I really started to be more consistent in training that Anson felt like, okay, let's split them 50-50. So it just took me a lot longer to get to that place.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Okay, that adds up. Yeah, I was trying to connect all the dots with the numbers, because the record keeping, it's all in different places now, and I'm trying to put it all together. So that's good. Yeah, it's a little bit of a dig. This is from 92. You're in the bottom left, first row, second from the left. I'm pretty sure that's you. I feel like, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes a little bit. This of okay, not quite getting the minutes we want, but as you're talking about loving being a Tar Heel, that's kind of the look I see of man, maybe XYZ, we'd want this, that, but this is my team. This is who I want to be with. That's, I don't know if any memories or any thoughts that come up with this picture, but the smile was great. I loved the setting. I thought it was.
That was actually, I think that was at Duke. Looking at the stands in the background, that's definitely not our home field. I'm pretty sure that was at Duke. Okay. It looks like it might have been an ACC championship. I'm not sure. But yeah, I cherished my time at UNC because I just had such love and respect for my teammates. We had such a great diversity of personalities in our teams. And I just always felt like I belonged. So I think that's the piece that even when I wasn't playing, it was okay, because I had a bunch of other teammates that were supportive of me and wanted me to be there. I felt like, I was valued. And so I think that's what you see. And that's why I chose to stay, because I just had such a great time and connected so well with so many cool personalities on that team, and just really unique women.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Very good. Well, jumping ahead to your last 2 years, your minutes skyrocket, and you're still splitting some time, but you start to overtake Shelley, who has been a fairly established goalkeeper at this point. So, was there sort of a sense of like, yeah, I did the thing that I set out to do, or was it kind of a surprise of like, oh man, like they're making a shift of you get named captain your senior year? I guess I'm curious of how you viewed yourself in the team, where at one moment you're into the bench, and then I'm sure, very quickly. I say quickly,
it wasn't quickly. Not in my mind, it wasn't. It took years.
Time, but like going to your senior year, you're getting minutes. So like, how did you view yourself in the team, knowing that like, hey, like I'm taking a totally different role here? Like, how did that all develop?
I don't think that's how I kind of viewed it. You don't when you're in it. So the biggest shift was coming into my redshirt junior year when Shelley was a senior. Shelley had won 3 national championships. She was clearly the starter. And so in my mind, there was a clear shift. That's when I finally started to see sports psychologists. So this is an era when you didn't have sports psychologists for the athletic department like they do now. I took a sports psych class at school as part of my, curriculum. And in that, I think that was that spring, heading into my redshirt junior year, and found it very interesting. So that was kind of the first time that I had gotten a little bit opened up to that, as well as at Soccer Plus, Tony always had a sports psychologist on staff that would speak to the goalkeepers. And so I'd been exposed to 2 different sports psychologists through that environment as a student. And then when I was in college, I was a staff coach working those camps. And so between my professor and working a little bit with my professor, I had the opportunity to kind of privately, seek out that professor outside of class on a one-on-one type of basis. So that helped. And then that summer, working with one of the sports psychologists when I was working camps, just did a lot of individual work as to what my mindset was going to be. And the biggest piece, obviously we talk about it all the time, is like control what you can control, all of those pieces. And I just really started to identify all the places where I was, giving my control away and putting pressure on myself. And so basically I took all it's the shift that we also talk about now of like outcome focused versus process focused. And so I just took the target, the goal of starting, which was always like what I was gunning for, completely off the table. It was like, well, Shelley's a senior. She's won 3 national championships. She's going to start. Like, she's a good goalkeeper. She has every, reason for me to believe that she's going to start. And so I just was like, let's just take that off the table. You've got your red shirt senior year. After she graduates, that'll be my year. So that was kind of like how I went into my year. It was like, all right, you're going to be the backup. That's how it's played out. But that doesn't mean I stopped caring. And it didn't mean I stopped like trying. And I think that's the shift that some people, it just meant I shifted what I was paying attention to. So it didn't matter what Anson was going to do. It didn't matter, all these other pieces, the feedback that I was getting. It was like, okay, what do I enjoy? I enjoy being a goalkeeper because I enjoy shutting down my teammates. What are my pieces that I'm still going to commit to being fit. I'm still going to try and be the best goalkeeper I can be. And it's just really started focusing on that to a whole nother degree. And lo and behold, things fell into alignment when you stop focusing, on the stuff that you can't control. And I started playing for fun. There was joy in my game. There was consistency. And that was at the end of that preseason when Anson's like, we're going to split. And we're going to split the season. And we're going to make the ACCs and the NCAAs. We will go with 1 goalkeeper at that point based on who we think plays the most consistently throughout the season. So the season became kind of the competition to determine who went into postseason. And that was the season that I became the starter in postseason. And I would not have ever predicted that. It was largely just based on taking the pressure off of myself, that piece that I put on myself to be the starter. When things, that one will take care of itself when you stop focusing on it.
And maybe you just said it, but talking about the sports psychologist, I feel like anyone I've ever talked to that has either seen a sports psych or seen a therapist or a counselor or just talked to someone, they kind of come away with this like very specific one sentence or phrase or idea that like, oh, this is a huge relief for me, that like I had not really considered this or I hadn't viewed it this way, but you know what, this is right. And this is now kind of my new compass, that like this is my new thing I'm pointing towards. Did you have any sort of that moment with the sports psychologist of kind of like, oh man, like that's completely right. This is the direction I need to go now for myself.
I can't say there's like one moment, and I can't say that we even, some of the stuff like process versus outcome, all these terms that we are so catchphrases nowadays, these were not the terms that we were using back then, but it was clearly what we were doing and shifting. I think the biggest shift for me was just to stop shifting my attention. Like I was paying attention to what Shelly was doing in training. I was paying attention to the feedback she was getting from Anson. Why is Anson always looking at Shelly when she makes a great save? And why is he always looking at me when I make a mistake? Like this is where my mind was. And if that's where your mind is, you're not fully focused on being present. And goalkeeping is really, as you know, demanding of being in the moment. And so, that's why you're going to have inconsistencies. And it's just everything about being in this negative mindset, this negative loop, instead of, focusing on the things that I can control. And so that was just really it for me. And it took some practice. It took me actually sometimes I would have to actually actively look away because it was really hard for me to not get swept up in like comparing myself one-to-one with Shelly. So I had some different strategies so that I would train myself to not get so comparison minded.
Well, and I think the reality is most goalkeepers are not in a position where it's so neck and neck. Like if it is that, one thing happens really quickly that like either someone like drops out or someone really gets ahead or someone moves away. They're like, no, I'm not going to be in this environment. I'm going over here. Especially now, like there's very few at any level where it's really competitive. Goalkeepers are splitting time and then goalkeepers stay in that environment. But I think, to be fair, everyone that's been in that environment, like it is very easy to turn on your teammate mentally of like, I wish they would mess up. I wish the coaches would be more critical. And then like you can very easily feel a little bit better, but it's kind of a false negative of
correct.
Like I'm getting distracted and caught up in something that is maybe even fictional. So I'm over dramatic, making a bigger deal about something.
Correct. It's your perspective, and it's not an unbiased perspective.
Absolutely.
It's just not a healthy place to be, and it breeds negativity. It's just not a good place to be. And so I just got back to like playing for joy and playing, enjoying showing up to training because I was fortunate enough to get a beautiful place, great teammates, great school. Like, there's so many positives, So there's one little nugget. I'm not starting. Okay. But there's a gazillion positives out here. So let's start focusing on all those. And
then, not a coincidence. You start playing better. You start, like you take away those distractions and you just kind of focus on yourself. Yeah, the ceiling does rise to yourself. And I kind of stupidly didn't clip. By Noonan. Sorry, but I wanted to show this is. I'm pretty sure this is from the '94 final. You might have to correct me. Okay, very good. You know exactly what it's from. I will say, to just point it out, I always loved how any clip of you diving or coming out for a ball, how parallel you get. You have so many goalkeepers, like it's just not a thing you see as near as often anymore. But you ain't getting your hips up so much, and it's just like it's a monster get. And I just also think it's funny. I think people think, oh, the 90s, everyone just kind of sat in line. Like, no, that's actually not. That's not what a lot of goalkeepers are doing. So, like, not only coming for this ball, but like you're getting your hips up to a point where you're getting very flat. It's not a ball you have to go get. You could leave that, obviously. But I saw this, I was like, man, you just don't see that kind of action very often.
Well, thanks. Certainly one of my favorite games to recollect for sure. Good memories there.
Yeah, wonderful. Tell me a little bit the '94 championship. I mean, I guess this is kind of a softball question. I don't know, but like emotionally, I'm sure you're just elated. I mean, was there sort of a sense of like, like I did the thing that I set out, or this has proved something? I mean, what? Or was your mind somewhere else at 94?
No, I wasn't in that like, I've arrived, I've done it. I wasn't in that mindset. Okay. I think because I already had felt like I knew I had that capability before. I knew that we were neck and neck, It was literally on any given day, Shelly could have played in that game and we could have done equally as well. We were that close. It wasn't like I was like so vastly superior to her that year. It just literally was like, you know, my year. Things were clicking for me. She had other stresses going on in her world, I'm sure. You know, like, we're human, you know, but easily she could have played and we could have won a national championship. I think I was just taking it game by game. And, you know, at that point I was just enjoying playing. And that's why things were just clicking for me.
Awesome.
I think one of the neat things about that game that you don't recognize by the scoreline, because I think the final was 5-0, if I recollect properly, is at that point we had these TV timeouts because, all right, the finals were finally being shown on TV, but we had these TV timeouts halfway through each half. And those clips that you just showed were from the second half. It was 0-0. I think maybe 1-0 or 0-0.
Okay.
Maybe we went into half at 1-0. I don't remember if we scored in the first half or not, but it was close. And so let's say it was 1-0 at that point. Whatever it was at that point when those clips were happening, and I had like a series of crosses that I took, we were sitting at 1-0. And then we went into a TV timeout. And then all of a sudden we came out fired up, and then it was like goal, 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 goal. And so the scoreline doesn't show that at that moment, you know, the goalkeeping did have an impact, because most of the times, you know, people would say in the 90s, you played at Carolina, you didn't have that much action, you know, 5-0 final. But we did. We were starting to, you know, there were times against the right competitors for sure that we were an impact in the game.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. I think maybe the other most painful moment that I could probably pull from your career is probably the 95 season. And I mean, I'm putting myself in your shoes, or I'm trying to at least, of, you know, your season ends like most goalkeepers, like on getting a score, you lose, you get scored on. But I think maybe what people probably wouldn't think of is like, man, y'all have had such a expectation of winning to not even get to the final, to a team that y'all beat last year 5-0. So 5-0 and in 94 y'all beat Notre Dame, and then coming into 95 semifinal you'll lose 1-0. And from what I couldn't find any clips, from what I could,
because I have yet to want to watch that. I was like, if he pulls that clip, I have never watched that clip. I replay it over in my head painfully too many times. I was like, I don't want to see a clip. I've never seen that clip. I don't want to see that clip.
It sounds like the ball is kind of bouncing around, gets hit up, and then like you step up forward, and then someone goes to head it and puts it over you. Is that?
So it was a free kick. So we're at home. So we're hosting, which we had not, I don't even know when the last time we had hosted. We had hosted during my time period, I think. But so to set the stage, you know, fully, we're hosting the Final Four. Obviously the expectation is for us to win. This would put it at a decade of national championships for our program. So we're sitting at 9 national championships. That would put it at 10. First time we're having like an alumni thing on that weekend. Not that like felt like a pressure to me, but you know, there was all these alumni that were there. And it's a free kick. And I remember, I'm pretty sure, I forget who hit the free. It might have been Heather Manthai, Holly Manthai might have been the one that took the kick. And it's Cindy Dawes, I think, and Cindy Parlow. I know for sure it was our player. Cindy Dawes either hit the kick or went up for the header, but it makes more sense that she went up for the header with Cindy Parlow. So free kick gets hit, and it's hit from like kind of around the area of the benches into around somewhere around the PK spot-ish. And I had a high starting position on the free kick. I start to think about going, take a few steps, decide to call away because I don't think I'm going to make it. But now I've taken myself a couple of steps out. I'm trying to recover back. It goes off of Parlow's head, and it's an own goal up and over me. And one of my teammates and I were trying to scramble back to try and get it, but it was like perfectly placed above both of us. But it was early in the game. You know, I want to say my first 10, 15 minutes. So we're all like, no big deal. We're fine. We're good. And we literally dominate the rest of the game and can't score. I hardly had any action. That's the kicker for me. Second half, I don't think I hardly even touched the ball. I don't even think it hardly crossed into our half. That was what was painful. And the crowd, I think, was also quite stunned. The crowd was like quiet. because they couldn't believe what was happening. We hit the crossbar, we hit the post, we hit defenders on the line. Renola had a game of her life, like everything that we could possibly do, but hit the back of the net. Like we dominated, but couldn't win. So we lost on an own goal. And so, yeah, that was painful. Super painful.
I'm sorry to bring it up, but obviously
it's okay. It's sports.
I mean, I do think it's kind of funny of, talking to other goalkeepers, like, a lot of their moment and talking to Jen Renola, a lot of the high points of their career usually involves UNC, like something about I forget the number, but I think it was a quarter of the goals that were ever scored on Jen Renola in college were from UNC. Like, it was just like that. I mean, obviously Notre Dame, very talented team, but when she played, like, they either did really well or UNC was giving them some gas. So, I guess I'm curious so that moment happens, and what are those next either days, weeks, months, like, where you're trying to figure out, okay, the team just had the World Cup that summer, so you're still kind of probably tracking the national team a little bit, but UNC wraps up. You'd already used this would have been your 5th year, so
I was graduating in December.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
And then, so what was like the process of like, hey, what is the roadmap forward? Were you looking at getting away from playing, or was it more like, hey, I'm going to figure this out? What, was there kind of like a licking of the wounds of like, man, I can't believe, like, I just can't imagine playing after that. Like, where was your mind after the semifinal?
I mean, it's hard. Obviously, it's depressing. You're at home, and then you have the finals taking place on Sunday, and your team's not in it. My family was there, and my family wasn't feasible for my family to come to many games, and my mom and my dad were both at that semifinals too. So I think I just spent the weekend with my parents, because it was rare that I had both my parents in town in Chapel Hill. So it was hard and it's depressing, but whatever, you move on. I don't think there was much time spent about like, the soccer piece at that time. Because my plan was to go to physical therapy school. I was graduating, coming up in a few weeks. I mean, back then the Final Four took place before Thanksgiving, like the bracket was so much smaller. So this isn't December, this is mid-November. I think we finished the finals the weekend before Thanksgiving, because we had Thanksgiving. It wasn't like nowadays. So we're still actively like going to classes, and we've got pieces till I graduate. Granted, I was in, I think, 2 classes at that time because I didn't have to I was in my final semester. But my tracking was planning for physical therapy school, planning on taking the GREs. What are the pieces that I need to do next, and going to class, those pieces. And I don't know the timetable of this. I want to say it was probably December. So several weeks after that, after the final, is when I got an invitation into my first national team training camp. And I had been in one, I don't know what it was, U19, one youth national team training camp prior. I want to say it might have been my freshman or sophomore year. I don't know. I got brought into a training camp, but it didn't really matter back then because we didn't do anything. It was like a training camp, just to have a training camp at the US, Olympic Center at Colorado Springs. It was cool, but it was like, I don't know what we're training for, because I don't believe that we ever went to any event. And it was also that era when there was still US Olympic Training Center, like the, I'm trying to think what they were called. Wow, what am I thinking? The US Olympic festivals. So I was a part of those during some of my summers. And so I remember one summer that it took place in Denver, so they had the 4 regions and we were competing as teams. So I had those experiences. And one of the summers, our team played against the full national team, and got thrashed. But so I had some of these little experiences being near or around, some of these other top players around the country, not just my, Tar Heel teammates, and tracking the national team. But then, I got called into my first national team camp. And I think a part of it was we were prepping to go into the 96 Olympics, but there was a holdout that happened where a few of the players were holding out because they were trying to get put on contract for the first time. So the core veteran group held out and were not in that camp. So it opened up an opportunity for more people to come into that training camp, and I think it happened in late December. But it was the camp that helped determine who was going to be brought into residency for 96. So that was my first real shot. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see. This could be a one and done, and then I'm off to grad school, or it could, last for longer. And I got called into residency. So I was like, all right, well, we'll see how long this lasts. And then we'll go back to school when this stops, Yeah. So that was always the mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine there were probably some parallels with the goalkeeping depth chart of coming in at UNC and the national team of, hey, like very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
I think your cap total is kind of, I don't know if funny is the right word, but you see 24. And I think at the time, like so much of that was going to Brianna Scurry. So to get 24 at all, and same for Saskia, like is kind of like impressive just knowing like Scurry was playing so much. But I guess I'm curious.
We didn't even have that many events.
Yeah. It's tough to get any engaged. Yeah.
If we were in a non-World Cup or non-Olympic year, there were very few events. Yeah, very few games. So yeah, it is hard. It was hard to get minutes, and then it was very hard because there weren't many events.
Yeah. Do you feel like you got a fair chance and shake at like the national team, or was it one of those things like, man, it was kind of similar to UNC, like, hey, I think I can play, give me a chance, like let me get on the field? How did those, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. Did your time at UNC kind of mirror your time with the national team as far as like trying to get in to the starting spot, or was that a totally different experience where, different setup, different, hurdles to clear?
Definitely different structure. I mean, it's just different, like if you're in a World Cup year, an Olympic year, you're in residency. And so you have this like long buildup where you have an opportunity to train together and prep. But in the other year, in the non-Olympic and non-World Cup years, it was also very different too. We might have like the Algarve Cup was a big event, an occasional friendly here or there, but they were just standalone events. There were no other events. Yeah. So do I feel like I got a fair shake? Yeah, I do. I had in those non-Olympic and non-World Cup years, 96, I was just, I was thrilled to make the residency. That was already a huge achievement for me. Mary Harvey and Bryce Scurry were the other goalkeepers. And then Saskia came into the mix late because I got injured right before the roster was named. I would have been an alternate, and then I got injured, so Saskia became the alternate to the Olympic team. But I was there in residency for 6 months, and that was a huge win for me to be in residency as a collegiate just out of college with, these studs of Mary Harvey and Bryce Scurry that had so much more experience than me. So I was learning. I was, gaining experience. And so that was part of the journey for me was you're here to learn. You're here to get better. And then 97 and 98, I got minutes. I earned minutes in different showcases. Were they the big games? No, they weren't the big games. They were Canada, they were Brazil or the Netherlands or Sweden, and some of these different opponents. I think my first camp was against the Ukraine. And so I got some different minutes. And then I think the best opportunity I actually did have, it might have been early 99 or it might have been 98. I don't remember where. But when we would come into these events when we were not in residency, that's where I would do the best because I would nail my preparation. One, because I was fortunate enough to be here in Chapel Hill. So I still could take advantage of training in this environment with my college team or training with the men or training with these different, college men that were in the area. So I had a pretty good environment because we didn't have a pro league. So you had to organize your training environment well. So when we would go into a standalone event, I would come in ready. And that was always like my advantage. And Bri sometimes would not come in ready, but when she had a residency, would always get ready because she just is a fierce competitor. And when she was in a good environment, she would get ready. And she was such a gamer and just had athleticism that I was never going to have. No matter how hard I trained, I couldn't have her athleticism and just her nerves of steel. Like she just, she had all these qualities. And so there was one event that we were prepping to go in January to China, to Guangzhou. And I came in, I nailed the camp. I did have a bit of an injury towards the end of the camp where Kate Sobrero slid into me and thrashed my knee, broke her jaw in the process because she didn't jump me on a breakaway. It was a rainy day, last 5 minutes of training. So I get a little bit banged up right before we go, but she got more, she took the brunt of it, unfortunately for her. But, that's, and that was the part of like the national team that was very similar to UNC, was just like training was full go. It was always full go. Those were pieces that, having come out of UNC, really prepared me well for the national team, was how competitive it was and how important fitness was. All those pieces about my collegiate experience translated well for me. But so came out of that training camp, because I think we had maybe a week or 2 week training camp before we went to China. And I was told I was going to be the starter in China. So this was just like a huge get for me, because it was going to be China. I think it was going to be Norway and maybe Germany. I don't know. I know it was China and Norway. I don't know what the fourth team was. It was a 4 Nations Cup, I think, in China. It was a big deal that year. Yeah. Start of the year. We get there and we have our first training, and it's like fresh off the plane. You go to the hotel and we're going to have like a jog stretch and a little knock around. And the little knock around is on some, I don't even know if it was a field. It was like what patch of grass that we could find, that we could do some knocking around on. And the worst, it wasn't grass, it was mud. It was rainy because it was winter in this southern part of China, nasty area. And we're literally just playing like a pickup game, essentially. And I'm on the field and Tony's on the field, and the ball gets popped up and I go up for like a header to compete for it. And as I come down, my foot lands on his foot and I do my ankle, and I immediately hear it pop, and I'm out for the tournament. And so, that event, it's nobody's fault. It's just bad luck. But that was a shift. That was a tough blow for me, because that was a big opportunity for me and a key time. Whether it was 98 or early 99, it would have been a key time for me to be able to have a chance in a big event, to be able to establish myself. But I never had that chance. And so then, further on down that year, whenever I got back from my ankle injury, Bry's back, and you have to take advantage of those few moments when Bry's not on her A game, because when Bry's on her A game, nobody's touching her, and so in theory, I had that chance and I was ready, but I had an unfortunate injury. It's just is how it is.
Yeah. Well, I guess can you, this might be like an incredibly long answer, or maybe a very, very short answer. Can you compare Tony and Anson real quick? Because from everything I've ever heard and just hearing people talk, it sounds like they have an ability to work well together. And maybe, I don't know if I could be wrong on that.
They work well together?
Well, can you compare them? Because they seem so different from everything I've heard of.
Yeah. I mean, I never had them obviously I had Anson as my collegiate coach and Tony as my national team coach. I was never on the national team when Anson and Tony were together, because obviously Anson was the head coach and Tony was the goalkeeper coach for a short period before there was the transition. So I wasn't on the national team when Anson was the head coach. I was only coached by Anson at UNC. I was coached by Tony on the national team. So that was kind of my relationship with them as coaches, coach player. So, but for me, I guess the quick answer is Anson to me is an unbelievable motivator. His ability to motivate players and bring the team together on a common mission, I think is one that felt very motivated, leaving the locker room to go playing games, and motivated in training to work hard because of his design of that competitive cauldron. So I think those are some of the things that I really benefited from as a player in that environment at UNC, was that structure of, whether it was fitness, learning, that component, or just the competitive design of training, and that it was okay to fight and compete. And that's a big part of our DNA on the national team. But then under Tony on the national team, again, a good motivator, but different style of a motivator to me. And I felt like Tony's real strength was connecting with the players on an individual, like not just on the field, but off the field. His ability to have, I think he has more empathy, to be fair. His ability to connect with us as humans, to me felt different. And obviously I had a relationship with him as a coach player, having grown up with him in Soccer Plus. So I kind of had that goalkeeper coach difference, and then seeing him in his role as a head coach was a shift. But I knew him differently.
Interesting. Okay, that all tracks. Yeah, I mean, Tony definitely someone I never crossed over with, unfortunately, but always seemed like the fun uncle that you would like give 110% for. Like, it's not just he's like kind of a silly fun guy, although it definitely seemed like he has the ability to connect with people. But he somehow managed to get you to be like, yeah, I'm all bought in. Like, I'm going. Like, like there's not. It's
I think
not
you're
just
bought in for a different reason, or at least I felt that way. And still bought in for team, his ability to also. I think one part that was different about Tony, another piece that was different about him, is his ability to recognize his strengths and his weaknesses. He's very human in that regard. Like in the areas that he was not going to necessarily be strong in, he's going to bring in somebody that's strong in. He was bringing in Colleen Hacker. He was bringing in, Lauren Gregg, who was amazing at video and analyzing things, Jay Hoffman. Like his staff was completing pieces that he wasn't bringing to the table. And he wasn't afraid of admitting, when he made a mistake in training, or if he, there were some instances where, your emotions get the best of you and you're not in your best form. We're all human. He had no problem owning up, after the fact, if he, was out of line, in interactions. And that's not a piece that I see from Manson, personalities. And so they lead from different places. And I feel like Tony led from his heart.
Yeah. Interesting. I have 3 things I want to ask you to wrap up. I know we're going a little long here, but just to wrap up on this. It seems like your time with the national team wraps up with April Heinrichs coming in and going a younger direction. Correct me if I'm wrong, but can you walk me through when that door closed for you? And even it's interesting that you had really kind of 4 years of playing with UNC, 4 years of playing with the national team. When I think you would assume to have a little bit of a longer run. Did you feel like the door was closed in a way that made sense, or did you feel like that got closed a little bit too early for you? How did that all conclude for you?
Definitely too early. I'm gonna mince words here. Wasn't given any warning. And I wasn't alone in that. So I know Saskia was in the same boat as me. And then Tiff Roberts, Tisha Venturini. I don't know if there were more. That might have been it. That might have been the 4 of us. That go from being on the World Cup roster in 99 to not in the first training camp in 2000 with a new coach. I don't know about the rest of them, but I didn't receive any warning on that. The roster was named and I wasn't on it. I spent that off season crushing myself because we knew that Tony was resigning, forced push out. So Tony was out and we knew a new coach was coming in. So to me, I was like, clean slate, no matter what, I'm going to train hard. That's just, how I operate. But I was extra motivated because I was like, okay, it's a new coach and it's an Olympic year. I'm going to come in and I'm going to crush it. And, and Bri, having just won the World Cup, has all these public appearances. So she's getting pulled. She's getting pulled in a different direction. In fairness, she's taking advantage of that moment, which is smart, but I did not have the same, draw as a reserve goalkeeper. So I'm back training and I'm getting ready and I'm not in the first camp. And I was like, wait, what? How did I get cut without even having a chance to be in front of this new coach? Had April been around the mix? Yeah, April was a youth national team coach during the time when I was on the full team. So she would be occasionally in some of those events with the full national team. So she would have known the roster. But she didn't know me, as a player. So that one hurt. That one hurt really bad. And I remember talking with Tony at the time, like, Tony, like what am I supposed to do? Like, how am I supposed to prove myself? How am I supposed to get in the mix? And he just said, just stay fit. You'll get your chance. And I said, all right, I don't know how, but so then Bri got hurt. Bri wasn't ready because of, her fall not being spent training. So she got hurt. The next training camp, which I think came in like late February for the Algarve Cup, that year, which was a big event going into an Olympic year, I get called in, and I'm pretty sure there were 8 goalkeepers.
Oh, wow.
Me, Saskia, Siri, Jenny Branham, Emily Alexic, Hope Solo. All right, so I'm up to 6. So at least 6. And I want to say there might have been, probably Lakeisha Bean and maybe Jamie Pagliaro.
Okay.
Pretty sure we had 8 goalkeepers.
Wow.
So April just, and besides Saskia and I, everyone else is a collegiate goalkeeper. So and maybe Siri, let's see, Siri was a freshman in 94. So she would have just finished her college career. No, Siri was a freshman in 95. Yeah, 95, 6, 7, 8, 9. So she would have just finished her career at Carolina. But she had played under April. So April knew her well as a youth national team goalkeeper. So she had that advantage of having, a rapport with that coach. And I went in and I crushed it. I was so ready. I'm like, this is your one chance to be in front of this coach. And I had a great week. I can unequivocally say probably my best training camp I had ever had. Consistent from the front end to the back end. Everything that we did in the goalkeeping sessions, it was with the goalkeeper coach, Eric Yamamoto from Santa Clara. I crushed it. I did so well. I was so pleased with myself. Fitness, mid-team, because we had fitness rankings back then.
Yeah.
Not mid-goalkeeper. Like it was mid-team with all my field player teammates, and then the stack of goalkeepers were down here at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I was like in every matrix, on the field, everything that we did, I felt like I separated myself in every dimension. And I never felt good. Like as players, there's always this unease when you go into your individual meetings at the end of the week, so the roster's being named to go to the Algarve Cup. So there's always this unease. That was like the first time I felt like there's no way I'm not getting not named for this roster. Like I have done everything to clearly set myself apart. And I wouldn't say I was cocky, but I felt at ease.
Yeah.
And I get into my meeting with April. And again, I can clearly remember the room. This is like how damaging it was to me. And she sat across the table from me and told me, you were the best goalkeeper in camp. Like I definitely remember those words. You were the best goalkeeper here in camp, but I don't feel in my gut. That's what I got. In my gut, I don't feel like you can perform in the big game.
Yeah.
Speechless. I just was like, and there's nothing you can say in that moment. Like, do I, in retrospect, wish I had kind of fought for myself a little bit more? Yeah, but I was never brought up that way. I wasn't brought up that way. Would it have changed things? Probably not. But do I wish that I had had the nerve to fight for myself a little bit more in that moment and advocate, the sense of what big games have I ever played in April? The biggest game I'd ever played in that 24 cap history was a half against Germany. And I got a shutout in that half against Germany. I was behind Rye. I was gaining experience. And then the best chance that I had, to get in there, I had injured. So I didn't have a lot of big games.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I can change about her gut. A coach that just didn't have me in her future for whatever reason. It's a hard pill to swallow when you feel like you're at the top of your game. But at the end of the day, I did everything that I could. So I at least feel like I can sleep at night. There's nothing I could change her mind.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate reality is, as goalkeeper coaches, we can give all this great advice and detail and, all these things. But the reality is your connection with the actual head coach as a player is paramount. And if the head coach just doesn't have the vibe, doesn't have the gut feeling, like, whether the goalkeeper coach is in their ear or not, or the players advocate, like if the head coach has a feeling that's like, it's not this player, you can end up just hitting this wall of like, well, what else am I supposed to do? How do I change your
and Saskia was in the same boat too. I would have ranked Saskia right next to me in that camp. Yeah. Like the two of us had the most experience. And I was shocked that neither of us, would have been moving forward and given a longer look. I think that we were owed a longer look, give us the Algarve Cup and then see if I can play in that big event and then see if your gut is right or not. So had I wished I had fought for that a little bit for myself? Yeah. Easy in retrospect, but because I think in the moment I was just in sheer shock sitting there, just, in that meeting, just listening.
Yeah, I can't even imagine trying to respond in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared.
Yeah. Well, then, I guess, tell me about. I mean, that's arguably the biggest gut punch of your career. Then you go play 3 years with Boston in WUSA. I guess I'm thinking how easy it would be. Like, well, if I'm not, if I'm getting tapped out already, then like, what's the point? So I guess I'm curious. What was your mindset going into Boston, where you've gone from UNC national team where you've got really strong defenses and a team in front of you, where Boston is, I think you, in your first year with Boston, you had more goals scored on you than both your national team and with UNC. So
yeah, we were down at the bottom of the table. There was a lot of action. Yeah.
So what was the driving force with Boston of like, was it just trying to play as long as possible? Was it trying to get some sort of personal conclusion for yourself? What drove you to Boston?
Well, when I got cut in early 2000, when I saw like, all right, national team is not going to be in my future under April. Thankfully, the conversations behind the scenes were already that WSA was coming. So I kind of knew, just hold on for a year. You're going to be in the mix for a pro league in 2021 or 2001. Sorry, my dates are wrong. So that part helped, kind of soften the blow that, all right, your career's not just ending on this like cut. You'll have an opportunity to keep playing. And so there was no real agenda of like, I have something to prove. It just was, I enjoy playing. I enjoy training. This is kind of all that I've done. And like, okay, is there a way that I can do it and get paid? Great. Because up until 99, we had some bonus structure and we had a small salary, but that was the first time that we had been paid, And so, to be on that first generation of being a pro player, that was the motivation. It was like, I get to be a pro player. I get to be paid for, this living and not just, piecemealing everything together with a gazillion coaching sessions. So I think that was more of why I wanted to stay in it, not just because I wanted some personal vendetta or proof or anything like personal accolades. It wasn't about that. And then I was allocated to Boston based on, my history of growing up there. And at the time I was a little bit bummed because I lived down here in North Carolina. I was like, I want to play for Carolina because this is where I live. But in retrospect, it made choice. It made sense that I was allocated there from growing up there. But I was actually really pleased because the first time my parents could come to my games. And my parents came down to almost every single one of my home games. And so that was really unique. Great way for me to kind of close out my career in the area that I'd grown up in. And my high school coach would come to games, and there would be people that would show up at games that I knew from, growing up in that area. And so that part was really kind of a silver lining for me that I didn't anticipate. That was really cool to end my career up in that area, as much as it was not where I was living. I got to reconnect with like a lot of people and playing in an area that I grew up. So I did value that. And we weren't the strongest team, but I had a lot of action. So as a goalkeeper, sometimes it's kind of cool to be able to be that difference, to factor in on the win-loss piece. And that was different than my time at Carolina and at the national team I was going to be under a lot more pressure.
I love how you're able to find not just a silver lining, but just like a lot of good in these tough spots. I think it's very easy for people to be dealt a pretty devastating blow and very understandably see them go a different direction. I don't fault people to see people move off of things that when you just have heartbreak or things just end. Like I get it. So it is very cool to hear that. I will say, and maybe this is not you, but when I was doing my little newspaper dive, I saw someone that ran the 2003 Boston Marathon.
No, I definitely didn't run a marathon. I think maybe in 2003 there was a triathlon that took place there. I can't remember the name of the company that was the big sponsor of it. It wasn't the Boston Marathon. There was some other event that did happen there, and I don't know if it had a marathon component, but it was a triathlon. And as a organization, we wanted to put a team in. And so I said, I'll do the cycling portion. And I had a teammate that did the swim portion. I was like, I did a little bit of swimming, then I kind of gradually became a swimmer because of injuries. So I was starting to become a swimmer, but I didn't want anything to do with swimming in the Boston Harbor. And so I had a teammate that swam, and I did the cycling leg. And then one of the office members, he did the run, which is ironic because that would have been something that we should have been good at. It was the running piece. But we had an office member that did the run portion. So it was fun. Yeah.
That's fun. Okay. When I talked to Heather Taggart, there was someone who was a photographer with the exact same name. And so I'm giving her all these compliments on like what she had done. She's like, that's not me. I was like, okay, well.
Yes, I think that must be what you must have seen.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess last big piece here, and there's so much I'm looking at that we didn't even talk about, so we could easily double this. But I did want to mention Dynasty, and I know you could talk all day about this, and I know we're running a little bit long here, but I guess probably my big question would probably be centered around like the intentionality of doing something that clearly has your fingerprint on every aspect. And I will say, when I worked the 1 week this last summer, I had this really like hit in the face moment of I can't remember her name, but some player comes up and basically says, hey, I'm having this tough club situation. And your response, you were so quickly to say like how proud you were of her. And I would just thought for a second, I was like, I don't know if I've ever heard a coach tell a player, just in a kind of a normal conversation, that they were proud of them. Like, yeah, sometimes at the very end of the season, like there's that, but it was the whole setup was very, you talk about empathy, like there was so much focus throughout the whole week of, obviously we got a task to do, but also there's a connectivity aspect that goes on here that, not just checking a box of, okay, you trained today, you're done. Like the whole week is so filled with okay, Tracy, you want to do this, and then this, and then this, and this, and this. So that's, I guess, from my perspective. But I guess I'm curious on, you've crafted Dynasty and you've had this camp for how many years? And
20 years now. 20.
I don't know. I think it's a lot. What has been like the big driving force, thinking back to stuff that you had or didn't have? What are the things you're like, oh man, this is for sure, we got to do this, or this has to be a core component, or man, because I didn't have this, we got to have this in here. What are those big core pillars or tenets when it comes to Dynasty, when you're making a camp, that you think, hey, like this is something I'm going to be really happy with?
Yeah, core component was looking back upon my youth experiences at Soccer Plus, was the relationships and the mentorship that I got from pro players. They weren't just like this coach up there that I didn't get to connect with. Soccer Plus was big. It was big camps. I mean, they're anywhere from like 75 to 100 plus goalkeepers in that environment. But there was this connectivity with the coaches at meals, walking back and forth to the field. Like I got to know Kim Wyant, if she was my group coach. Like I got a written evaluation from her, not just like a circle the number things. Like I got feedback that mattered, but I also got to see them train, and that palpable connection made a difference. It shifted my career like in a huge way. Same with Mary Harvey, and then I think I was even on staff one summer with Mary Harvey, and was able to be like her roommate when I was in college, and she was with the national team. Like, so these moments that collected over time were huge moments behind the scenes that shifted pieces of me, and that were big key moments in driving me as a player. And so that was kind of more of like the basis for me. And after I finished my playing career, I actually was a head coach at Greensboro College. That was my first start. I was like, all right, what am I going to do now? All right, let's just start here and figure it out. And learned a ton. Wasn't quite the right fit, but had a lot of experience as a D3 coach. You're wearing lots of hats. And so that was helpful for me. But what I also found out was what I cherished the most about coaching is the relationships formed with my players. And that's harder to do as a head coach when you're determining who starts and who doesn't, and you're wearing multiple hats at a D3 level. And so that was kind of like the driving force for me when I set up Dynasty. Was I want to mentor these kids and I want to have a relationship with them that's meaningful. And so in order to do that, the structure has to be different. We have to be small. So that was a big decision early on, was quality over quantity. So definitely different business structure than everything else that's out there on the market. We're going to go small. We're going to have more staff coaches so that you can have more touch points with that player on the field, off the field. And you can get to know them and build that relationship that will be meaningful for both parties, because it's equally as meaningful to me. It gives me huge fulfillment as a coach. But it's also certainly very meaningful, I hope, for my students. If I'm doing my job right, it's going to be meaningful mentorship for them as well. And it's just not this like quick hit, you're one and done, see you later. No, there's ongoing communication because you get to know the kids in that environment, and it's very uniquely different, which is what you saw. And I think that's what the kids are craving and what they need, especially females. But to be fair, the guys that I work with, they feel the same way. They love that too.
And we talked to Jack Robinson, who's the head of U.S. soccer goalkeeping. We talked to him yesterday, and he was mentioning all this very detailed, had a lot of answers that were basically, well, it depends, and not just giving like big overarching, things. And I asked him, I was like, hey, is this something that you think is kind of where America is as far as a country, and you're trying to, match that, or is it just where modern goalkeeping is? He's like, well, a bit of both, and kind of talked about how, the more detail we get, like, it's just better for everyone. And, someone's going to be in a different arc, and some people, they're just having a good time, and, they're not going to go be a pro. And some people can be a pro, but they've never had someone tell that to, like, everyone's on different arcs here.
Right.
And just seeing a pathway for everyone at Dynasty, I was like, man, this is awesome. So I really enjoyed my time down there and highly recommend it. As a bit of a plug for it. No problem. But last thing here, and I think hopefully this will cap off everything, but an intentionally kind of vague, open-ended question. But when you think back to everything, what does goalkeeping mean to you?
Good question. I think to me, goalkeeping is a mindset first and foremost. Like you've got to really like embrace and excel in this position. There's a mindset that has to be there. This mindset of this fierceness, grit. This determination, wanting to be in that position of pressure and plus or minus, like you're going to be in that spotlight, and wanting to take that on and wanting to take the physical risk to tie this all back to kind of how we started this podcast is, to me, it is a certain mindset if you're going to excel here. Yeah. Are there physical pieces? Yes. Are there technical pieces and tactical pieces? You have to, be able to analyze the game. You have to be able to make decisions. Yes. All those pieces are important. But to me, it starts with a certain mindset. You've got to have that right mindset to be able to excel in this. And then, all those other pieces are only going to magnify you even more. But without that mindset piece, I think it's harder. You've got to want to be in this uniquely different position.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was younger of hearing kind of like, mindset stuff and those intangibles. And I think as a kid, I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, it was so on like, well, I need to solve the task. So what's the technique or what is the tactic? Whereas, although that stuff can be helpful, if I have the right mindset of like, hey, like you've got to be really commanding, or you've got to be fierce, or you've got to be brave here. Like if I didn't have that as a baseline, which sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. Yeah. Like that would really determine my success. Yeah, you could be really brave and maybe be a little sloppy, but you're going to get the job done.
Right. Correct.
You can have all the right answers, but if you don't have the right mindset, then like it doesn't really
right. Like if you're not going to be willing to stick your neck out there and take that chance to, make the block save or to win the breakaway outright, and all those pieces, like you said, you might not have all the technical pieces to start with, but you have the right mindset to get there, and we can shape all those other things around it. And the physical athleticism stuff is going to develop as you get older. We can work with those pieces, but it is much harder to give somebody bite and competitive fire and whatnot. I think you can enhance that. I think you can draw it out of people in certain environments, like, competitive cauldron. And, we certainly structure some of the things at Dynasty with measuring certain attributes and creating games and competitions that are going to bring that out of people. But there is you either have it or you don't. Like, I can't give it to you. It's like confidence. I can't give you confidence. It starts from within, and then we can build it, So I think that there is this innate piece in people, and then I can there's a spectrum, and I can draw it out of some people, and we can build it. But if you have more of it, it's only going to get even better.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see that. I really do see it. It's a mindset.
Yeah.
It's a mindset. Yep.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much. Like I said, we went a little long today, but I'm looking back at everything. I probably said about 40% of the things I had written down. So, awesome. Yeah, it's an awesome career. I know some people have a short time with goalkeeping, and that's great. But to have someone that even till this last weekend still doing goalkeeping things, and we'll be doing more in the future, it's a lot of fun to talk to. So I appreciate the time. Thank you, Tracy. It was awesome.
Thanks, Bill. My pleasure. Love being on here. And so thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely.